Hello, hello. Hi, gang. I'm not going to lie to you. It has been rough. No, I'm not talking about the market, not yet. I'm talking about the tourney. And you know what tourney I'm talking about? The Lehigh ladies, that didn't work out so well. St. John's, the Johnnies, I was hot on them for a while. And then I think because of my affinity for Charles Barkley, I went down that Auburn rabbit hole. That didn't work out. I was so desperate over the weekend. I was thinking to myself, I may as well take the easy money with Duke. That wasn't so easy either. Only two teams remain, and I've got tonight to make it all back. The college basketball championship is tonight. It's Florida and Houston, the BetPark Sportsbook and online casino app and the Play Gun Lake app. They've got you covered. So much fun when you've got some skin in the game while you watch. But whether your team wins or not, there's always another way to win on the BetParks online casino and sportsbook app and the Play Gun Lake app in Michigan. Plus, they've got it all going on. Live dealers, blackjack, craps, roulette, hot online slots, Cash Eruption, 88 Fortunes, Cleopatra, the online slots, all your faves, new users up to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down in the first 24 hours. Go to betparks.com or playgunlake.com. Download the app right now and enjoy all the action in time for tonight. You got to be 21 and in PA, New Jersey, or Maryland for BetParks, 21 and in Michigan for Play Gun Lake. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let's talk some Smerconish.com daily poll questions. I've got a lot of catching up to do, and then I want to frame today's poll question because I love it, and it's unlike anything we've done before. So Friday when it was all just going down, I asked, has President Trump just triggered a recession? 39,546, really robust voting for a Friday. 90-10. Yes, he has. 90.36% said yes to that question. 9.64% said no. Okay, now it's Saturday. And on Saturday, I really had a great CNN program. No, I don't always say that, but I was very, very proud of the CNN program. Despite what was going on in the markets, I opened the program with a commentary about how President Trump is stifling debate everywhere, among lawyers and law firms, among academia, members of academia, I guess I should say, among the media. Erwin Chemerinsky was my guest. He's the dean of the Berkeley Law School. Brilliant guy. And we talked about that issue. And then my guest after Dean Chemerinsky was Peter Navarro, the president's point person on all of this tariff business. And the Saturday poll question asked, will the Trump administration tariffs ultimately be good or bad for the United States? Are you ready for this? 88,171 cast ballots. In fact, I want to get the printout of where they came from because I'll bet it was a vote not just domestically, but I'll bet we had a lot of overseas voting as well. 92.21% said it's all going to be bad. It's all going to be bad. So the same sort of 90-10 break that we saw on Friday as Trump triggered a recession. Now, ultimately, is this all going to be bad for the United States? Yes, was the view of 9 out of 10. Now comes Peter Navarro. So Peter Navarro is my guest. Let me just see if I have my, I do. So I've got my New York Times in my hand, the same New York Times print version that I bought at Wawa early Saturday morning en route to do the program. And what I most wanted to ask him, and did ask him, Peter Navarro, what I most wanted to ask him is, did you anticipate this? Did you forecast this bad of a market reaction to the announcement of the new Trump tariff policy? And I actually held up the Saturday New York Times. His answer, which I will play on radio today. With respect to the markets, it's been an orderly retreat, as it were. We're in a situation where we're simply rebalancing and restructuring. I can guarantee you that the market will find its bottom and that the Dow will hit 50,000 easily during the Trump second term. That's probably tomorrow's poll question. So, and he goes on to make the case, and I let him make the case. And then I finally interrupted him. And I said, but Peter, my question, did you anticipate this? If I had been with you 2 or 3 days ago at the announcement in the Rose Garden, would you have expected that on Saturday morning, it would all have hit the fan to this extent? And then he said, well, it hasn't hit the fan. It hasn't hit the fan. Look, sure, what we're having is a restructuring and a repricing of companies. That's a given. But, it hasn't hit the fan. And then I interrupt and I say, well, he wants to know, what are you talking about? And I said, what I'm talking about is that the S&P fell 6% on Friday, bringing its losses for the week to 9.1%. And he never did answer my question. And there's more to it, obviously. And I was able to work in, I was really glad that I did this. I was able to work in a little bit about the caller that I had on the Friday program, who is the bike salesman from Florida, and said, I've got 20 cartons of bikes sitting in Taiwan with a 43, I think, % tariff. He said, I can't afford, my margin's not that much. I can't afford to get them. And if I did get them, I'd have to pass it on to the consumers. And I asked Peter Navarro, what do you say to that guy? It was a really good exchange, a really good interview. It was respectful. And yet, and I've watched the tape thereafter, I think I asked the appropriate questions. But Peter Navarro said to me, you're not asking the right question in your poll today. What you ought to be asking is whether the United States has been treated fairly by other nations. And I said to him, okay, I will ask that question tomorrow. And I did. That was the Sunday poll question. Didn't go the way that Peter Navarro would have hoped. Do you think the world is treating the United States and its manufacturing base fairly? I took notes. That's what he said. So I framed it just the way that he wanted. 35,621 for a Sunday. That's a good vote. 72% said yes. 72% said yes. And I must tell you, even though I've read in on the matter, I don't feel sufficiently knowledgeable. And we're going to get a guest within a day or two on radio to address exactly that. I can only tell you that the Times had a pretty good piece on it titled, and when was this? This was last Thursday. Global trade robs U.S., Trump says, but is he right? President Trump has accused America's trading partners of undermining the United States for decades, saying they've engaged in unfair practices to steal the country's wealth and enrich their own economies. He has set his sights on not only adversaries like China, but also on traditional allies like Canada and Europe, yada, yada, yada. In some cases, there's truth to the president's claim that the United States offers its trading partners more favorable terms than it often gets in return. As a proponent of free markets, the United States has long been more open to trade than many other countries. Still, trade experts say that Trump's claims include a heavy dose of exaggeration and hypocrisy. So that was the Sunday poll question. And now here we are. And as I speak, and as I speak literally before the markets have opened, the futures markets have opened. The world has just spoken before our markets open. Things are looking bleak. Things are looking bleak. From the Associated Press, Dateline Bangkok, shares nosedived around the world Monday as higher U.S. tariffs and a backlash from Beijing triggered massive sell-offs. European shares followed Asian markets lower. Germany's DAX following 6.5% in Paris. The CAC 40 shed 5.9%. Britain's FTSE lost 5%. U.S. futures signaled further weakness ahead. The future for the S&P 500 lost 3.4%, while that for the Dow Jones Industrial Average shed 3.1%. The future for NASDAQ lost 5.3%. So it's really looking ugly. It's really looking ugly. I can't remember, um, not even in 2008. I can't remember a level of concern like this where I came on the program and this was my focal point, and we were all wondering about the markets, wondering about. I mean, that was another question that I asked of Peter Navarro, was to say to him, I was privileged to have a relationship with the late great Jack Bogle from Vanguard, and Bogle was a proponent of, own the entire market. I also, on Saturday on CNN, I cited Jeremy Siegel, stocks for the long run. I remember listening to a lecture of Professor Siegel. Today, he's a professor emeritus at Wharton. I remember listening to a lecture that he delivered like 20 years ago. That book of his, I think, is in its fifth or sixth incarnation. And yet he stays the course. In the long run, the market is where you want to be. But of course, Bogle always said, don't look at your statements until you need them, until it's retirement time, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. And I said to Peter Navarro, what about somebody whose retirement time is now? They were prudent. They invested in the market. They didn't look at the statements. They got to look at the statements now. And Navarro was to say, they got to ride this out. President Trump, coming back to Washington last night, spoke of, needing to take the medicine. So the Dow closed Friday at 38,314.86. And my poll question today, which I very deliberately recorded, asks as follows. Trust me on this. I don't always get it right with these poll questions, but I can assure you that a lot of thought goes into them from me. Will the Dow Jones Industrial Average close higher or lower this Friday than it did last Friday? And then parenthetically, I give you the number. I didn't want to, initially I was wording it as, on Friday when it closes, will it be higher or lower than where it opened today? But I didn't want to do that because it gets a little tricky with the futures market. So instead, I've bookended this. I've said, here's where it ended on Friday, 38,314.86. When it closes Friday, this Friday, is it going to be higher or lower? And my own answer to that is that it's all dependent upon whether the administration makes deals. Because if there were to be today or tomorrow, if there were to be an announcement that we have struck a deal with a major trading partner, despite what Trump announced in the Rose Garden on Liberation Day, that, instead of it being X percent for everybody, if he were to announce that we've struck a deal with a large trading partner, signaling that it's a negotiation, then I think the market would be on fire. But that's not what he's saying. And if you listen to, on the Sunday shows, the different people who are put out by the White House, I found them to be inconsistent. I mean, I figure it's like, an old bookie operation where the phones are ringing off the hooks and people are picking them up and taking wagers and so forth. That's my impression. The administration, Trump says that more than 50 nations have reached out. Okay, I'm sure they have. But are we striking deals with them or not? If we strike deals and this is all just a big Monty Hall, let's make a deal, a name that I threw into the mix last week, well, okay, that's one scenario. But if it's not, then this is going to be a long and ugly process. I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you one thing that it has convinced me of, or reinforced to me. The President of the United States really is the most powerful person on the planet. And maybe you're saying, well, Michael, that's a truism. Of course I don't know. I've often wondered about the level of power in the 21st century, checks and balances. How much can a president really do? Well, this president is really doing it. At this moment, not for the better. But I've thought about the different market ups and downs over the years, and I can't identify something so specific where a sole presidential policy created worldwide upheaval. There have been other demonstrations of presidential, quote unquote, leadership, but often with the assent of the Congress, which brings me to a final observation. And that is, how long is Congress going to let this go on? How long are Republicans? I saw the outpouring. Yeah, I personally saw the outpouring of protest where I was this weekend. Are Republicans going to answer those calls? I mean, people's retirement are in jeopardy regardless of party, race, ethnicity, gender. It's a scary time. It's a scary time. And I'm also paying keen attention to how this is being covered on all the cable outlets, because some are not even touching it. Last thought. Saturday, I told you about that huge voting in the poll on Saturday. So driving to deliver my program on CNN, knowing it was going to be market dominated, I was curious to know. I'll just say it on Fox and Friends. How are they dealing with this? And my ride was a 20-minute ride, so I listened from the show open at 6, which begins with the Star Spangled Banner, till I had to get out of my car and get my coffee at 6:20. They hadn't said a word about it. In other words, this was the Saturday headline from the New York Times. Trump's tariff push sends market reeling. Yeah, it's that big of a story. Page 1 above the fold, banner headline. Hadn't been discussed at all for the first 20 minutes of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, today's poll question at Smerconish.com. Will the Dow Jones Industrial Average close higher or lower this Friday than it did last Friday? And I put it in the question because, frankly, on this coming Friday, I don't want to have to dig. I want to be able to go back to my result and have it right there. 38,314.86. I'm thinking, but I'm not locked into this, because who the hell knows what today brings. But I'm thinking the 50,000 question might be tomorrow. Depending on what happens today. Thank you all. Have a great day. Go vote at Smerconish.com. Like and subscribe for those on YouTube. And set yourself up for notifications. See ya.